All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome you all for this really exciting session, exciting content that we have. I am thrilled to welcome you all for the first edition of Graphversation. This is something which I've recently launched, a monthly live stream event that I'm going to do to bring graph experts and ninjas for engaging and informative conversations about the fascinating world of graphs. So, I'm super excited for doing the first session that we have today with us, Michela. Michela is founder and CEO of Mod, and we are going to do this as a IWD special. We just know that IWD was around the corner on March 8th, and we're celebrating this entire month as a month of Women in Tech, International Women's Day. So on this occasion, I am pleased to welcome Michela for this really exciting conversation on graphs. Hey, Michaela, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Sid. Thanks for having me on.
Great, awesome. I think, Michaela, before we start, let's have a quick round of introduction. So I'll go first. For folks who don't know me, I joined Neo4j think a couple of months back, roughly 8 months. I'm leading the developer relations for APAC here at Neo4j, working with developer relations, communities. That's what I'm doing over here. Love to know, Michaela, more about you as well.
Hi, everyone. So I run a small studio in Sydney, Australia called Mod, MOD, and we are a real-time and virtual production specialist, which basically means we use tools and techniques from the games industry, and we do real-time interactive entertainment, but we also do components for film and TV. We do a lot of creative and technical R&D, and that's how we first came across Neo4j probably about 5 years ago. I've been a developer for 3 decades at least, and I'd never thought about using graphs databases, but we decided to use it for one of our projects, which was a VR documentary that we released, over a year ago now. And since then, we've probably been used Neo4j on about 4 or 5 different projects.
Wow, this is really exciting. And you mentioned that you are in this tech industry for last 30 years, 3 decades. Uh, why did you
Yeah,
why did you choose tech specifically? 30 years is a very long time, and tech is kind of boring for a lot of people. But why specifically tech? What was the first spark that excited your interest in working in tech industry?
okay, so look, just quick qualification. I don't really think of myself as working in the tech industry. I'm just very fortunate that I'm able to work with lots of different tech in working as an artist and a director. So I
Mhm.
run a small studio, and some of our work doesn't actually intersect with the tech industry as neatly as other sectors that Neo4j is more common with. But really, it all came back to the fact that my dad brought a Commodore 64 home in the mid-80s, and I was forbidden from using it without his permission. So something that would probably have been just, I don't know, of no interest became of real fascination. And I used to sneak into my parents' bedroom in the mid-80s and teach myself how to code and play games and just really be part of that first generation of microcomputers, because technically I wasn't supposed to be doing it. So that's kind of how I got started. I've been a developer since making very crappy basic games in the mid 80s, and but in terms of career, I was one of those people who was I had a great piece of luck when I was at university, which is I was doing computer science, not because I was looking for a career in computer science. I was playing in a band, but because of the 80s experience, I'd always known how to code. I'd always had an experience and an interest in coding. And so software development was something that I knew how to do. And so I ended up doing it at university. And by the time it got to 4th year, it's a bit of a crazy story, but basically I knew I was at the bottom of the class. My maths wasn't great, and I knew that they'd probably start kicking people out from the bottom of the course for the honours year, the 4th year university year. So I went into uni a week early, and I went to the head of the department and said, do you have any honors projects. I'm interested in doing honors this year. I thought if I get in early, maybe they'll be less likely to kick me out. And that way, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just playing in bands. And anyway, he said, look, there's this topic that the last year someone did a really bad job on, but you might be interested in this topic. And he gave me this thesis to look at. And I opened it up on page 1, and it instructed you to telnet to info.cern.ch on the command line. And then it said, welcome to the World Wide Web. And I went, oh, this sounds interesting. And a few weeks later, I set up the first website in New South Wales, as in Australia, one of the states in Australia, as part of my honours thesis. So it wasn't about merit. It was totally about doing computer science at the right time to have my mind open to the possibilities of doing art and storytelling online back when there was hardly anyone involved in that. Just imagine going to the pub and trying to explain to your friends what the World Wide Web is, because no one's heard of it. So that was a huge gift to me, and it has allowed me a lot of creative and technical freedom. But yeah, it wasn't a career path that I set myself out on, but online technology has really been the backbone of my career.
Wow, this is really fascinating, and really getting to know someone who has been at the time when the World Wide Web was at its inception to now, where you're talking about Web3 all the way. I'm sure it has been a fascinating journey and a roller coaster ride for you.
Yeah, it has been. And in some ways, I mean, what excites me about tech, and I think there's never a bad time to get into looking at technologies. But I think what's exciting at the moment is I'm starting to see certain signs of new things in the same way as in the early 90s we saw this new thing, the web. There's the other day I was talking about theater companies that only perform in virtual reality. That's a thing, right? Now there's only about 10, or I can count them on 2 hands at the moment, but feels to me like the beginning of the web, because when I did I did the first website in New South Wales, because back in those days, they kept track of everything on the web in a list. They said, what's new? And they added your website to the list. Can you just imagine that? And then like 2 months after I joined, they went, this is crazy, forget the list. But you can still look up the list of what, every website, they added it to a list. And it feels like that with some new forms of storytelling. We're at a new age now.
Interesting. Those are really great insights. And you touched upon the part where the programming language is one aspect, technology is another aspect. Would you also want to talk about why do you think it's important for women specifically to join the tech industry or this software industry, basically? Is it important? If yes, then why?
Look, I think it's important because it can be very empowering. I think in general, we're not as empowered by technology as we think we are. But you have to understand what technology is in order to see it with clear eyes. And I know when I was studying computer science, I was partly doing it because I was very suspicious of industrial use of tech. I was very interested in the Luddites, the political movement that destroyed the looms because they were worried about industrialization. Yeah. They weren't afraid of the technology. They were afraid of the uses that it would be put to. And so I think women have an opportunity to have a stronger voice by being present in the room when decisions around the use of technology is made. And culturally, I mean, what I find absolutely astonishing is that if you look at the history of women in computing before the 80s, before the 1980s, women dominated, or there was huge input. Women had an incredible influence. The NASA moon missions, the mathematicians. There was just all the way back to Ada Lovelace working with Charles Babbage. But when Commodore and other computer brands in the 80s decided to market microcomputers at boys, they basically created this artificial distinction between something that was like a very neutral product. There was a huge spin in the 80s. And so I think women and girls owe it to themselves to look through the stereotypical, oh, computers and software engineering is just for guys. If you look at the history of this whole space, there's always been women there.
Definitely. And I feel it's somewhere or the other related to the support system that one gets from the industry. Um, I'm pretty sure the support system is way better as compared to what it had been, let's say, 20 years back then. Now, where more women are coming into the industry. Um, what kind of a support system you got from this industry? It could be technical, it could be it could be internal, it could be external. Like anything that you would like to share with our audience. Like how did your support mechanism worked?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm look, for me, I've worked for myself most of my career, and I think often there's more formal support in larger organizations, but there's also sometimes more problems with providing support to women, people of color, any minorities, or just any group that feels disenfranchisement in a sector. So I can only speak from my experience, and I'm a trans woman. I spent the first 4 years of my career, I was identified as male. But after 4 years, and I'm 52 now, so I've been in this game for a while. But yes, I noticed a huge difference in how I was treated from the first 4 years, and then maybe the year 5, 6, 7. But in terms of the positive and the support, it's not so much about, I can't speak from a historical perspective, but my own experience, the best support was people who like you, people who believe in you and get to know you. And that's going to be different for every single person. The most valuable support that I've had in my career in the tech related set has been, I always like to know who makes the tools that I use. And so I've spent a lot of time getting to know the vendors of the tools that I use more and more, and that often influences me whether I continue to use software. It's not just about the feature set, it's about the people behind the feature set. And I've found, especially as the owner of a indie studio, where we do quite high risk and sometimes it's considered unusual or fringe, just because we're not a large company, that we get great championship sometimes we get really good champions within large companies because people can see that we use their technology in interesting ways. So vendors is one thing, so the people who make the technology you use. And secondly, just working with a large number of people. As you go through different jobs, different organizations, I feel it's really important to understand the network that you personally have. It's the biggest asset you have. And so staying in touch with colleagues from past jobs, past organizations, it's a bit like in Hollywood, they have this saying, you never have a bad meeting. And the reason they say that is because everyone's very polite to everybody in a Hollywood meeting, because you never know if the next time you see that person, they've had a hit or you're going to need their help. And I think that goes with any sector. So it's top down. Organizations who have some empowerment already, like the people who make the tools and the world that we work in, but also just your peers and competitors. It's friendly competition between small business can be really intense, but in the sectors I work in, I always like to know who is doing something similar to us, so that sometimes there's a real opportunity to help your competitors for the purpose of building a sector.
Great, this is great. And I also feel that while we have a better support system nowadays for women in tech, we have a lot of conferences that specifically support women in tech, a lot of meetup groups that are supporting women in tech and encouraging more women to come in the industry. We have various programs out there specifically catering to that segment. So, but I feel there is a room for improvement everywhere. There is a scope of doing things better, improving it. Thinking about your career so far, what is something that you would change to improve the equity for women in our sector?
Look, I think, are you familiar with the term intersectionality?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it really comes down to that. It's just, it doesn't matter what group feels that they need more support. When that
Right.
group then becomes more empowered, and then they become, they stop listening to the needs of other groups, that's where problems I see become cyclic. So, there's been lots of women, as you say, there's lots of opportunities for women in tech. There's not always, making sure that all kinds of women from different industries, from different cultural backgrounds, economic backgrounds, have equal access to those opportunities is still a challenge, and especially in a sales and marketing oriented town like Sydney, it's very easy for these groups to be dominated by, the financial markets, or, certain, middle class concerns that perhaps may not be as relevant to everyone who needs the support. So yeah, just keeping an ear to the ground. There's a lot of different interests in a society, and I think sometimes it's easy to over. It's not to say we don't want support, but I think sometimes the more structured these support organizations are, the easier it is for other people to fall through the cracks.
Great. So we touched upon intersectionality. Would it be right to say that these conferences or events, which are very, very specific for women, they're rather contributing to a greater segregation rather than supporting it to some extent? Or can we say that it's a mix of both?
Yeah, look, I don't know, Sid, to be honest. As a trans woman, I have to be very careful about how I present myself in these kind of discussions, because there's all kinds of infrastructures and approaches that work very well for certain people. For me personally, I don't typically attend a lot of those groups. And for me, the best way to empower a woman in a career is to give her money and opportunities, And so my focus, I run a team, a small team. We aim to have 7 people. We've got 5 at the moment. And at the moment, we have 3 women and 2 guys. For me, it's about creating opportunities so that women can actually apply for roles and get paid for what they do. I'm super wary of the endless opportunities there are for women to do free labor. And there's even I know there's a lot of discussions around International Women's Day now, because women are constantly being asked to speak about things, and it's all very well to do this every now and then. And I'm Neo4j are a partner of ours. We're very happy to speak, to give time towards this discussion. But if it's just discussions, I sometimes feel it would almost be better to stop people being paid to put on these events and just create a position for someone to learn a skill or apply what they know. So, but that's me as a small business owner. And you could say that's not being strategic enough. But yeah, I think part of the problem is just the reluctance to pay women the same as paying men.
Yeah, true. This is like kind of eye opener for a lot of people, I'm sure, and I'm hoping things would get in a better shape going forward from where they are now. And since we're talking about Graphversation over here, it's always good to talk about conversations around graphs. And I want to know, you are working on Grapho. It's a storytelling project in XR. Would you also want to talk a bit more about Grapho, what Grapho is?
Sure. So I mentioned we did a VR documentary project a couple of years ago using Neo4j. The idea was, instead of just telling a story with, say, like a PowerPoint presentation, or with a video wall, I had this crazy idea that it would be interesting to stand in a virtual world of data and explore the data with my hands. And a friend of ours who had been using Neo4j for a few years pointed me at the Panama Papers investigation, where the International Consortium of Journalists used Neo4j to pull together all of this investigative journalism into a nice, neat graph and give it to the public to look at. And I got really excited, because I was like, okay, well, we've got some data here. Why don't we try putting it in a graph and then create an XR interface So a little bit like in the movie Minority Report, I can actually grab nodes and follow the money. And yeah, I'd love to say that was a quick idea, and then a few months later we implemented it and released it. But no, 4.5 years later, we shipped something, and it's on Steam for free as a documentary. And that was a really exciting opportunity for me to look at how hard is it to introduce a new user interface paradigm, because it was something that a lot of people are very familiar with the concept. They've seen it in a lot of movies, but making it actually work it was a really real journey. But the good news is that after that experience releasing an original independent documentary, we were then approached by an organization who said, oh, love what you did. Could you build us a forensics tool? So we went from providing like an entertainment experience around a graph of 200 nodes to providing a forensics tool for network science for a 4.3 million node graph. And where we are now is, after 3 or 4 projects, we're now in the position where we haven't proven the model commercially. We don't have enough business yet to say this has been a financial success, but all of the early investment has paid off in terms of we still have a dev team after 4 years building new feature sets and allowing this idea to work across basically any XR platform that exists. So we now support pretty much all the PC VR platforms. We support the pass-through systems that like the Quest Pro, and we're really excited about thinking of this less about a standalone product with like sort of toy features, but more like a plugin and a framework that allows any graph database, so any Neo4j customer, for example, if they wanted to explore or use their data in a extended reality sense, so if AR, VR, mixed reality, we've reduced the barrier considerably. So that's where we're working on. We're building, like, if you like, it's a white label framework for bringing that sort of 2D Neo4j Bloom or browser experience into three dimensions. And we certainly can't say that we've solved all the problems, but the fact that people are finding it an engaging experience is really promising.
So until now, I used to feel Minority Report as a science fiction. Now I can proudly boast around to my friends and family that I've met a person who converted science fiction to a real thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're using the Unreal Engine as the platform for doing it, and it's Epic Games, who make Unreal Engine, are a really interesting example of a virtual worlds company that, you know, yes, they make games, they make tools for making games, but what they're doing with Fortnite at the moment is they really are. I don't like using the term metaverse, by the way. I think it's great term for dystopian sci-fi, but I don't like using it in my business. It's too negative. But so I use virtual worlds instead. But I think it's really interesting what a games company like Epic has managed to do in terms of creating a virtual world system that can scale to different kinds of audiences. And so the way I've positioned Grapho from a design perspective is, what do you do when you're in the world? You know, everyone's familiar with guns, but what if you've got a need to display some complex information all of a sudden? So my idea is that what we're building and exploring isn't trying to take over the world with yet another world. It's about a mechanic that could potentially work in anybody's world. And there's some huge barriers to doing that. Like at the moment, it only works with the Unreal Engine. But from a design perspective, the concept is just, well, if you've got a graph, why not have the ability to not just treat it like a sculpture? Because as you're probably aware, there's been a lot of attempts of doing 3D graphics with graphs over many, many years. But it's about saying it's not a sculpture, actually allow you to get in there and change things, potentially edit it.
Yeah, it's good to play around with so when I am interacting graphs, I could just do it in the 2D world out here with my keyboard, mouse and stuff, but it's actually really fascinating to see how we can move it to a 3D world or a mixed reality world. and see we can play around with it like literally with your hands. So it's really fascinating out there. Great.
Yeah.
Cool. So we touched upon your Grapho or graph project. I'm curious to know a graph project. Uh, Sorry, actually, it's a non-graph project from your entire of your career, which you feel could be converted to a graph project, maybe in future down the lane.
All roads
Something
lead to
you're
graphs
passionate
today.
about. Yeah, something which you're passionate about. I mean, we're talking about going to the future now.
Yeah. Well, look, I love the question because there's two kind of areas of our studio at the moment that haven't converged, and I think they can converge over the next couple of years. And so the other one is, so you know all about our graph storytelling idea, but that's very much a first person experience. Maybe you see your hands because you're in virtual reality, or maybe it's just on a desktop and like a 2D interface, you're just you're pointing and clicking. But what about third person, like in a adventure video game or a documentary where you're seeing people move around? So the other project area that I'm really excited about is, after many, many years of experimenting and doing research projects, we are now able to use techniques like motion capture.
Wow.
And where you're essentially recording the movement of your face, body, and hands, and a technology process called volumetric video, or sometimes they call it 4D capture, where you're actually taking lots of video of the same person and you're building a 3D model from the video. We're now in a position where we're using both these techniques simultaneously on multiple projects to arrive at what we call performance capture. So a digital, and in the broader sense, the idea of digital humans, so avatars, if you like, but not just kind of social media avatars that maybe move their eyes or wink or something like that, but characters that can deliver a story or host a documentary, deliver performances that are more like film and TV, or characters in games. We are doing some work at the moment, which is back when the Matrix films were first released. So I just left university. So what was that like? They were making the first Matrix film when I was at Sydney University. I remember seeing the black helicopters flying around Sydney that day. The techniques that they were using then as like a major Warner Brothers picture, as a 7-person studio, we can now treat that stuff as, it's not a commodity yet, it's still expensive, but we have access to those kind of processes now to produce really high quality human characters. And I'm really excited about, we have a couple of projects that have been recording cultural heritage, traditional storytelling. Last year we were honored, during lockdown, we were invited to help record Holocaust survivor testimonies. And we recorded 2 months worth of testimonies from Holocaust survivors here in Sydney. And some of the survivors have since passed. So it was really precious testimonies, recording them like holograms. So instead of having one camera on you, Sid, imagine being surrounded by cameras.
And you're really creating a 3D mapping of it as if the person is in like still alive, still there, a live person itself. Wow.
Exactly. So what's really exciting to me is, we call this our digital humans pipeline for virtual production, which is a fancy way of saying, if a film or TV customer wants to have CG characters that look like people in their projects, then that's the processes you do. But for our next original, I want to be able to have a character in a 3D world, which could be like the game The Last of Us, which is very well known at the moment. But just imagine, instead of picking up an object in a 3D third-person video game, and you have the ability to like rotate it in your hand, imagine if you can like go up to a computer in a game or a project, and then actually start using a Grapho style mechanic to explore the complex data. So we're trying to bridge at the moment this storytelling with people and storytelling with graphs. And we're really close. I'm really excited about the fact we're getting close to the point where we can use those two completely different techniques in the same project to go from human scale to graph scale.
This is really exciting. I'm looking forward to this one. Um, I could recall there was a Bollywood movie, a very famous person, very famous actor, Salman Khan. He used one of like very similar thing in one of his movie as well, and I could relate back to that Bollywood movie with this. And I'm super excited to see how this gonna pan out. Let's hope for the best, and let's see how this is gonna scale. Fingers crossed. Great. Cool. While you mentioned about metrics, this is something which I want to give it as an FYI to people out there who are listening to us. There is a lot of reference in Neo4j with metrics. So if you're able to find it out, to tweet us, let us know what you find out. All right. So okay. So this is an IWD special. This is a very special edition that we're doing. So we talked about the initial part of it around women in tech, how the support system has been, your journey in technology. I'll also move forward from here and talk more in terms of how do you see the entire industry as a whole. Why do we need more women in leadership? Why do you particular in person as a person support empowerment and gender equality?
Well, for me, it's there's so many answers to that, but the main ones are, as someone who works in entertainment, it's boring if it becomes a monoculture. If women are over 50% of the population and they're not in a position to create the experiences, then it means that experiences are not being created for over 50% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel that, it's really important from not just entertainment or engagement perspective, but it's about robustness. There's, I don't want to go into kind of the stereotypes of gender and sexuality, but I do feel like it's any organization that doesn't have equality and diversity is weaker. It's about strengthening the foundations. And I think it's often easy to fool yourself that you do have strength and you don't need necessary. There's an Australian politician who actually, she's one of in the cabinet at the moment, Tanya Plibersek, and she made me laugh at a talk she gave to a bunch of women last year. She couldn't even tell the story without breaking into laughing. She was talking to this very well-established company board, and she asked why there were no women on the board, and this old man said, "We had a woman once. It didn't work out." It's like, there's just that mentality is, there's nothing more to say really. But I do think that, but talk can be really cheap. I do think it really boils down to women asking for opportunities and those who are not giving the opportunities, prizing that money out of their hands, prizing the resources. And I think that benefit, and it does mean that, some people will be to their detriment, unfortunately. That phrase of have the confidence of a mediocre white guy exists for a reason. So it's tricky, and I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do feel like, all you can do each year on International Women's Day is say, give women opportunity to do what they're good at.
Definitely, this is really great learning from you. And in fact, being a man, I kind of seen this as a trend. I'll not say as a trend, but rather I've seen this, or more of an observation, personal observation. um, Women tend to go with imposter syndrome a lot. They start doubting their own ability. Do you, in your experience, felt this somewhere, or with any of your peers, colleagues, friends, family, that being a woman in tech, in this profession, comes with an extra mental challenge that one has to overcome? One goes through this imposter syndrome, or is it my own bias to it?
No, look, I think it's a good question. And I think, yeah, if culturally you're not being encouraged to speak your mind or take risks. There can be a dangerous tendency to feel like you have to be brilliant at something before you can even apply for a job. So I think it's a really good point. I know that I suffer from that as well. And I think it's very easy to find, well, I've just got to work 10 times as hard as everyone else in order to get an opportunity. So yeah, I don't know. I think that is where external forces can be good. Organizations saying, even if you're not sure if you have the qualifications to apply anyway. People get jobs and opportunities for lots of reasons beyond their mastery of topics. And I think that's probably the main tip I'd offer there. So much of our society is formed from other factors than just, applying functions.
Great. Cool. I think that's pretty much I have in store for you. I'm actually ran out of questions. I can talk for hours. We can have this conversation for hours, but one that I have prepared specifically for you, I think I'm run out of that. But one last thing before we close on this session is, what advice would you give yourself if you're just starting out now at this point of time?
Look, I think. Well, I was thinking about that question earlier, and there's two things. One is you can't know everything but what you can do is you can find out who are experts or who have more knowledge in topics. So keeping track of who are acknowledged or recognized as experts in particular topics is a way of seeing that even those people don't necessarily know everything, but you can build a network of this person is good at this topic, and that becomes, the network effect can be really useful there. And then the second thing is, I really do feel, and this goes for anyone, it's not just for women, follow your passions and your interests. If none of this stuff is of interest, then you probably aren't going to succeed in it. But we're talking about areas that are so broad. I think it's really important that people don't just explore and study the areas that they think they should learn, but more expose themselves to a wide range of possibilities. And you're probably going to succeed more in the ones that you're actually interested in. So give yourself that opportunity to try different things. One of the best things I ever saw at university was watching, as a fourth year computer science student, supervising the first year computer science exams and watching the people who, they gave you almost unlimited times to pass the 3-hour exam. And the best students would usually finish in about 20 minutes. And so the people who were 3 or 4 times they'd sat, so they'd been doing this exam for 12 hours basically, and they were never going to be able to program. They were never going to get to second year computer science. There were tears, men, women. There was a lot of emotion for those who just couldn't get there. And so us fourth years had to really play a bit of a counseling role. Look, just because you can't pass a software exam, development exam, your life isn't over. It's not for everyone. And I know that some of those people would have gone into other parts of the tech industry, just not as software developers, or maybe they came back in 20 years' time and something clicked. So I think there's a lot of pressure to go down what seems to be the hot topics. And yeah, if you can give yourself an opportunity to go down some of the quieter roads and be honest about what you actually enjoy, that will help.
Great. This is really great advice. So find your own network or build your own network and relationship. Try different things out, but find your passion. Yeah, these are really great advice. Thank you so much, Michela. I know we can go for long, but we need to cut this short for our audience as well. I really enjoyed our conversation. Trust me, I had lots of things to learn from you. Someone who brings in 30 plus years of experience in the industry, seen at the time when World Wide Web, the internet was just starting, and the way we are seeing now and how we are consuming it. A person who is kind of transforming the entire way how we are interacting with data, how we are using it right now to think it in the future, how it's going to change in the future. So I really loved the entire conversation, how you as a person have emerged as a women, as a strong leader in tech, strong women in tech, someone who brings in a lot of values, a lot of energy and inspiration for other women out there. So thank you so much for sharing those learnings and sharing your journey, sharing your experiences, insights with all of us. Thank you so much for having you over here.
Thanks, Sid. Look forward to seeing who else you get on. Thanks for the chance.
Thank you. Thanks so much. All right, so this brings us to the end of our first edition of Graphversation. I'm super thrilled to doing this one, and thank you, Michela, once again for having us over here, having you with us. Let's end the session, and we'll look forward to having you next month with another graph expert who's going to talk about his or her journey in graphs and how graphs can be the tool to like build new relationships with data. That's it from my side for this time. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye.